Welcome back. In this random bits, we are going to create ourselves a first-person shooter in Unity, where we can run around and shoot some targets, get them to bounce. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so for this project, we're going to be using Unity 5.4, and we're going to create a new project. I'm going to call it Shoot It Proto, and we'll put it somewhere useful. And we are going to make sure that it is a 3D project, and click on Create Project. All right, and we can going to change the layout to a wide layout, just to make it a bit easier to see what we're doing. And the first thing we're going to do is in our scene, we've got our main camera and our directional light. And for this project, what we're going to do is we're going to use all the assets and some scripts that come with Unity in the standard assets package. So if we go to the assets menu and import a package, the first package we want to import is the characters package. And we can just import anything. The thing that we want in here is the first person character, but we can just leave everything checked and click on import. Give that a moment. All right. Cool. And the other package we want to import is under assets, import package is the prototyping package. And this contains a whole bunch of sample projects and models and objects that we can use in our games to prototype, and we're going to use that for our first-person shooter. So if we click import on that one again, give that a moment to import all the pieces. All right. Just going to drag that over there, make some more room. I'm going to change the slider so that everything changes into a list view by dragging the slider all the way down, or if you drag it all the other way up, you get the thumbnails. We go for the slider view. All right, so within the standard assets, if we go down to prototyping, to prefabs, we'll get a whole raft of prefabs, floors and walls and pillars and stuff, and that's what we're going to use to build our game level. So the first thing we're going to do is grab a floor prototype, 64 by 1 by 64. So these are done in Unity units. So you can see this is like a floor, and generally in Unity a 1 unit is mapped to a 1 meter scale. So if we grab that and drag that into there, we'll get our nice floor over here. And we're going to need to be moving around whilst we're creating this level. So what you can do with Unity is within the editor, if you hover your mouse over there, you can use the mouse wheel to zoom out. You can use the mouse wheel, if you press it in, you get to pan. And if you hold the control key, no, the shift key, no, the alt key, and the left mouse button lets you drag around as well, which you can also do by pressing the right key, the right mouse button, and dragging around. So we can drag around, we can zoom in and zoom out with the mouse wheel, and we can click and hold down to pan around. So we're just going to zoom out from there and rotate to something like that. Cool. So if you hold the Alt key and you rotate with the left mouse button, it just rotates around. If you rotate with the right mouse button, I believe it rotates around the currently selected object, perhaps, but they behave slightly differently. But no matter. Alright, so we're going to put our prototype floor there, and we're going to make sure that it is set to 0, 0, and 0 as its location. And just to keep things organized, we can do game object, 3D object, or rather create empty, and that will just create an empty game object, and we can click on that and rename that as level, and we can drag our floor prototype inside there, and that just makes it easy so we can hide all the objects that we're going to be creating, because we're going to add quite a lot of objects to the level. So the next thing we're going to do is create ourselves a wall. So there is a wall. Drag that in and put it over there. You'll see that it sits over there. And what we're going to do with the wall is position it along this edge here. Just going to rotate a bit so I can see what's going on. Cool. You can also click on this there to change from perspective to isometric views, or and a couple other, and you can also rotate around if you need to by clicking on that little gizmo over there. So we've got our wall over here. I'm just using the Alt key and the left mouse button to rotate around so we can see what we're doing. And they don't quite look like it's lined up. Let's just have a look here. It's definitely not to floor. Let's click on the floor. Oh yes, okay. So the floor, when we added it to the level node, it repositioned itself. So we're just going to reset it back to 0, 0, and 0. Cool, and then our floor is now sitting on top of the wall there. Excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to set that to 0, 0, 0. And if we look at our wall, the wall is got two sides to it with a bit of a roof on top, and we want this side to be facing inwards. So if we grab that, we can go and position it over there somewhere at -31, and that's because our floor is 64 units wide and the wall is about 1 unit wide. So we're going to push that out to -31, and we can also scale this by 10-ish. All right, and then we can add a pillar. So let's add a nice high pillar prototype. 1 by, is this the one we want? No, that's the tiny one. Let's get rid of that one. We want this one. That's right, nice higher one. 2 by 8 by 2. Grab that into there. And once again, you can drag it over, but we're just going to position it by doing this. So we go -31 and -31, and that positions it nicely in our corner there. Having terrible trouble with my keys today. Let's just have a look where that's positioned itself. I think we can actually move our wall to -32. There we are. Excellent. So that we get a bit of a edge coming out there like that. Right. And now that we got that kind of sorted, we can duplicate it and duplicate it and duplicate it. And now that we know roughly where the measurements are, so we can zoom right out. We can take each of these and go that this one is at positive 31 and this one is at 31 and 31, so in that corner, and the last one is at negative 31 and at 31. Right, so we've got a pillar in each corner, and then we're going to grab that wall over there and right click on there to duplicate it and duplicate it and duplicate it. So for the first wall we are going to put it at 32 and we are going to rotate it around the y-axis. You can see the y is pointing up there by 180. And then we're going to take the second one and we're going to do this by 90. Just zoom in and see which way it's facing. That's the front, that's the back. Just see where the edge is. Right, so it's like that, so this should be the front. So we will put that at 0 and at negative 32. No, change that, 32. All right. And then the last one, same deal. We're going to go negative 90 to spin it the other way around. We're going to go 0 and at 32. Negative 32. All right. So we should now have our walls in place. And just having a look here. Something a little strange going on with that one. Doesn't quite look right. I believe that is because this wall is the wrong way around. Let's have a look at that. Which way around do we want it? Yeah. All right. Just leave that there for the moment. It's this one that's wrong. 32, 32, 32, 32. This one seems a bit out for some reason. Negative 31. Not quite sure why that's doing that, but we'll leave it there for the moment. All right. Okay, so now we have our basic level set up. And rather than use this to have a look around, we can look to see where our camera is. And if we run the scene now, give it a moment, we can see our scene. Cool. But it's kind of boring. So first thing we're going to do is we want to be able to walk around that. So if we go back to the characters area, under the standard assets, characters, and you select the first person character, and you open up that folder, it will be a prefabs folder, and under there will be a FPS controller. We take that and drag that into our world. Alrighty. And if we then delete the main camera, and the reason we do that is that the FPS camera character has a camera built inside it. So we can get rid of the main camera, delete that, and if we run now, we will have a mouse look capability, so we can look around, and we can use the WASD keys to have a look around and walk around and strafe left and right. Alright, let's go have a look at this corner and see what's going on here. Yeah, something definitely not right with our map here. That's 2 blocks out, and everywhere else is 1 block. Alright, let's see if we can fix that. If you press the escape key, you'll get your mouse cursor back. If you click, it disappears. You press escape again, and then you can press the play button to unplay. Yes. It's at -90, -31, -90 at 31. There we are, that's the problem. That's at -32, and this is at -32. Alright. Let's have a look. Much better. Alright. Now one of the things you'll notice is, firstly, if we go and select our first person controller, is that we are positioned quite high off the ground, which is why we keep dropping every time the level starts. So let's just double check that here, and that's because our level object is not at 0, 0, 0, 0. So let's just set the level back to 0, 0, and 0. Whoops, and 0. And we can now see that our first person controller is now at a more reasonable place, although it's slightly embedded in the ground. Whoops, I moved the wrong thing there. If we go and select the FPS controller again, you can see it's kind of buried in the ground. We're just going to pull that up slightly. It's just above the ground, and then we can press play. There we are. That's better. Although we're still falling a little, so let's get rid of that and put us at 1. So it should be let's see, 0.5. No, this looks like it's always going to drop us on the ground, but that's okay. I'll put it back at 1. Bugs me that it's in the ground. Alright, and the other thing you'll notice that when we're walking around, there is a head bob and sound effects. And if we look with the first person controller selected, there's a bunch of options that we could do. We could have walking speed, run speeds, mouse looks, head bob. We can turn off or change the different sounds for the footsteps, change the way jumps work and they work. So there's a whole bunch of options there, but we'll pretty much just leave them be for what we're doing here. All right, so we now have a big empty level, and we should put some stuff in there. So if we go back to our standard assets, prototyping, prefabs, there's a bunch of other prefabs we can use here. So we're just going to throw a couple of these into the mix. So let's stick a into the level folder, let's put a big platform, and we're going to stick it in the middle there, and maybe put it a 2 meters off the ground. And then we can maybe add, what else we got here? Some steps. Let's add some steps in here. Park those over there somewhere. Just make that a 6. Oops, a -6. All right. And zooming out, let's add some other bits and pieces in here. Let's add a big cube. Go and put that in a corner over there somewhere. I'm just going to align everything to whole units so that the grid patterns line up. And then we're going to add another little path. I'll just reset it to floor level, and firstly add it as part of the level object, and then set it to 12 and 20. Okay, and let's add some smaller cubes. And add another slightly bigger cube. Cool. Let's just check with the position of those. 12, 20, 14. 16 and -18. And you can just left click to select objects. -18 and -19. Cool. And then the last things we can add, if we look around in here, let's add a ramp. Position it over here somewhere. And 15, and let's add another one and position that. Let's rotate it by 90 degrees. Position that at 10 and -19, -20, no, 18. Yeah, there we are, so it lines up with that cube. All right, and then the last thing we can do is if we just go and find our FPS shooter controller, we're just going to pull ourselves out of the ground there and stay on top there. Right, so if we press play now, cool. We've got some environments, some objects. We're standing on the edge of a little platform. We press spacebar to jump. We can run along and jump on top there. Jump up top. Awesome. All right, so we've got the basics of our scene going. Cool. Now, if you look at our scene, it's looking a little boring, and that's largely because whilst we have lighting that's lighting up the shade there, we don't have any shadows. Oops, I see we've got a cube that's not where it belongs. Let's drop that back into the level object. Make sure it's where we want it to be. Cool. So whilst we have a directional light in this thing, which is basically acting like a a sunlight where it's shining sun down from this direction, so you can see it's lighting the faces here and shading there. None of our objects are casting shadows, which is making it hard to tell where the edges are on some of these things. So what we're going to do is in the level object, the first thing we're going to do is go and make everything that's part of the level. We're going to check the static checkbox, and it's going to prompt us to say, do we want to apply this to all the children, so all the other game objects, namely all these prefabs that are inside level, and we say yes, change the children. And what that will do is we'll tell Unity that all these objects are static and we don't intend them to move whilst the game is running, and that allows Unity to apply a bunch of optimizations, and also allows it to do some interesting things with light maps and light baking and stuff that we're not really going to get into, but it's good to set things that aren't going to be moving around to be static. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take all these objects and select all of them with Shift, select the top one, and then select the bottom one with a Shift. So we select all the objects in the level, and you'll see that under their mesh renderer they currently have cast shadows set to off. So if we turn that to on, that will bring their shadows in. Now you might have noticed that all of a sudden we have this thing processing here. And what this is that this is Unity busy calculating what it calls light maps. So what it's doing, because these things are static, I'm not intending to be moved, what it can do is it can actually calculate or pre-calculate some of these shadows and bake them into texture maps so that it doesn't have to calculate it at runtime, so it can run a lot faster. And Unity will do these in the background for you, but you can control that if you click on the window tab, menu option rather, and you find the lighting window. You can grab that tab and drop it over here for ease. You will see a couple of things. So firstly, in this particular one here, we have pre-computed real-time GI is turned on, baked GI is turned on, and auto is turned on. So with auto turned on, it means anytime we make a change, like if I drag this cube a little bit up, for instance, you see it will start to recalculate the lighting, because it's going to recalculate where the shadows and the like are going. So if I undo that again, it will put it back down, and we'll undo that. Now, if we look under the light maps, we'll see that there isn't actually any light maps calculated, and that's because our directional light, if we look at the details for the directional light, it's currently set as a real-time light. If we were to set it to a baked light or a mixed light, baked would mean it only affects the light maps, and a mixed light means that it only that it affects real-time objects, so things that can move around in the scene, the non-static objects, as well as baked objects from a lighting point of view. So what we're going to really do is we're going to leave that at real-time, and we're going to go along to our lighting tab and click on our scene. We're going to turn off baked GI, and in our case our map is very, very simple, so we're going to turn off pre-computed real-time GI as well, and that will actually just speed up our game a little bit. So if we hit play now, we'll see that we have a little bit better definition because we have shadows and the like, so things are looking a bit better. All right. Cool. So let's save that scene. Save scene. We're just going to call it main. Oops. Main. And we will save the project as well. Right. So for our next bit, what we want to do is create a gun, and then create some targets to shoot at, and then wire up some logic so we can actually shoot some targets. So if we find our first-person controller, and in Unity, if you have an object selected and you hover over the window and then press the F key, Unity will zoom in to where that object can be found, which can be very useful. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the Alt key and a left mouse button to position myself so I'm looking like that. Alright, or more importantly like this. When you have the first-person control shooter, these little white lines is what's called the camera fulcrum. So it's actually the kind of what the camera is seeing. So if we position from the side, we can see that the camera is looking out this way, and this is effectively the window or the screen width that the camera is seeing. So we're going to position ourselves over to the side here. Cool. And what we want to do is we want to attach some things to the actual camera so that it looks like a gun has been held there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create, by right clicking on there, we're going to say create an empty, and we're going to call this empty, or we can change it over here in the inspector. We're going to call it the gun. Zoom back in there again. And what we're going to do with the gun is then we're going to right click on it and create a 3D object of type cylinder. And we're going to call this gun barrel. Currently it's vertical like that and way too big, so what we're going to do is we're going to rotate it around the x-axis by 90 degrees, because we can see Y is up, Z is away in this currently, and X is in and out of the screen based on this gizmo over here. And we can scale this down to 0.1 and 0.1. Oh no, we want that to be a 1, and this to 0.1. So we've got a bit of a thin tube. Let's make that 0.5, and we're going to move it forward about there somewhere. So if we run that now, we see we've got a gun barrel. You can see its shadow, and currently looking into the back of the barrel, which we will fix up soonish. But before we're going to do that, we'll go back to the gun, right click on there, and create another 3D object. We're going to create a cube, and we're just going to call it gun body. And we're going to make this about 0.5, no, 0. Make it 0.1 as well. 0.1, 0.1, one long. Make that 0.1 and make this 0.5. Let's have a look. Okay, let's make that a little bit bigger. Let's make that 0.2 by 0.3 and make that 1. All right. So we kind of have that kind of effect, which looks more like a giant machine gun than gun, but I think that will do. And then what we can do is we can pick on the gun object, and what we're going to do is we're going to shift it to the side slightly and forward slightly. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's a little too big. So what we can do is we can also make this 0.25 and 0.25, and we can also pull it to the side slightly, or slightly more, maybe 0.5. Pick on the gun barrel or the gun body, 0.1, and make this 0.2. Let's have a look what that looks like. All right, that looks more gun-like, but it is kind of at shoulder height, so we really want to go down a bit. So say this is not the barrel. Oops, undo that. Pick on the gun itself and shift that down a bit. Maybe 0.25. Or rather, negative 0.25. Let's have a look. No, failed to do the negative. Negative 0.25. All right. Yeah. 0.2. I think that will do. Okay, so we've got a gun barrel and we have a gun. One weird thing we have is that the gun is cast in a shadow, but we don't actually have a body. So that's looking a little strange where there's just this gun shadow floating around. So rather than giving ourselves a body, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick on the gun barrel and the gun body and set cast shadows to off. So we no longer have shadows cast by our gun. Excellent. So file, and we'll save the scene. Now the next thing we need is, because the gun barrels was the side, we actually need kind of like a target, a targeting reticle or whatever, so a dot on the screen that we can target with. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to create that using the GUI overlay that Unity has, part of the UI. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to game object, user interface, and we're going to create an image. And we're going to call this image target dot, and we're going to set it to be a nice red color. Cool. We're going to make it a tiny, so this is, we're going to make it 5 by 5 pixels, and then under the anchors we're going to show that it's centered. You click that center, then you press the Alt key and say that it's centered as well, and you'll see that will change to 0, 0, 0, 0. So click on that for center, hold down the Alt so that we can set the position, and then click on center. Alright, now if we run now, we will have a wee little red dot, well, square, in the center of our screen, but that will be effectively the center of what we looking at from a screen point of view. Cool. All right. Save up. All right. Now that we have a gun sight and a gun, let's create some targets. So we can go over here. We can right click. We're going to create a new 3D object. We're just going to create a cube. And we're going to call this cube target. And we are going to make it about 0.2 times 0.2 times 0.2. And we're just going to go drag it out to somewhere over here, up in the air like that. For the material, we can add one of the materials that we have knocking around. So if we click on the materials widget over here, it will open up and you'll see that it's got one material slot with the default material. If we click the little pick icon over there, it will list all the materials in the project, and because we've imported a bunch of the prototypes and standard assets, we will have one called pink grid. So let's pick on that one. Cool. So we zoom in to there's our little cube, which is going to be our target cube. And we're going to be using some parts of the physics engine so that the cube bounces around when we shoot that, or shoot it. So what we're going to do is under this material here, which is a physics material, we're going to click the little pick object and we are going to pick on rubber. All right. So if we run now, oh yes, the cube just hovers over there on the screen because although we've given it a physics material, we also need to add a component because it's not being affected by the physics engine because it is not a rigid body. So click on add component, do a search for rigid. We want rigid body, and that'll add some rigid body to it, or a rigid body component. We can mess with the weight and the drag and that kind of stuff, but we'll just leave it alone for the moment. And press play, and we should see it fall. And there it is, our cube. So the bounce, if I just pull it out a little further away, so we can see it when it start up, we should see it's got a little bit of a bounce when it hits the ground there, and that is because we've given it the rubber material. So if we give it a run that again, we can see it's got a little bit of a bounce there. So when we get around to shooting it and throwing it around, it should bounce off things. All right. Now we don't want to recreate that over and over again, so we want to turn that into a prefab. So if we click on the assets folder to get to our top level of our assets, we can just take the target and drag it into our scene, into our project area in the assets area, and that will create a target prefab. And we can now grab that guy and we're going to position him it say one over there, and we can drag another one and go and put it near to that one, and let's add another one, and this one we can go and put over there. So if we run this now, we should have a little cube over there, one up there, and one over there. Awesome. Let's save the scene. Right, so now we need to actually do some code so that we can shoot at things. And what we're going to be using is from one of Unity's training and tutorials. They have one here on using raycasts to shoot with, and we're going to shamelessly steal some of this code. Not to worry, this entire article, I'll put the link in the notes below the video, but I'll also walk you through what the code's actually doing. So I'm just going to scroll to the bottom here and find this piece of code here. Right. So switching back to our Unity project, we're going to go and find our gun and select the gun object. And we're going to add a component there, and we're going to add a new script. and we're going to call this gun controller, and click create and add, and then we're going to double click. So that was a new script added to the gun component, which is the empty we put inside our first person shooter controller. We'll just wait for Visual Studio to start up, but whilst it's doing that, we'll toggle back to this article. So what is raycasting? So raycasting is used quite a lot in Unity to detect collisions and interactions between objects. And pretty much, if we scroll down and find this picture here, Unity provides a bunch of functions that allows you to project, in this case this green looking line, an invisible line from a point in a direction, and it will calculate or determine if it hit anything along that path. And that's called a raycast. And so you can use it for all sorts of things. You can use it for detecting when you're about to, if you had a character controller, when you're about to crash in a wall, or in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to project a line from looking from where the camera is through that center point out, and to see if we hit any object. And if we hit that object and it happens to be one of our targeted cubes, then we can interact with the cube. So this whole tutorial here talks about, explains that in detail, but we're just going to steal some of this code. So if we wander down to the bottom here, and grab the code. So the first things we're going to grab is some of this. We're going to grab, we don't need gun damage, but I will grab gun damage as well. We're going to take the gun damage, the fire rate, the weapon range, hit force, gun end, and the first person camera reference. So we're going to grab those, and in our gun controller we're going to drop those at the top. I'm going to comment out gun damage for the moment. Going back there, the other thing we want to steal is this next fire, and I'll explain what each of these things are once we get the code in a working state. In our start method, we're going to add this piece of code, which basically is going to do component in parent. So it's going to look up the hierarchy and find the camera. So if I just save that for the moment, if we go back to Unity, because our gun is a child of the first person character, which is a camera, and has a camera component attached to it, that piece of code will, on the script that we've attached, the gun controller script, is going to work its way up the stack and find the camera that it belongs to. All right. And then inside here, we're going to grab some of this code here. Yep. So that's going to go into the update method. And we're just going to comment out a couple of things. Going to comment out that for the moment. All this laser line stuff. And that as well. All right. Cool. So let's walk through what we've got here. So firstly, there's a couple of public variables. One being the fire rate, which is used by the script to determine how fast you can shoot. One is weapon range, so that's how many units distance we're going to raycast out, and we're going to say anything within that range. If we hit anything there, we consider that to hit. We have a hit force. So when we shoot things, you'll see later on in the script what it does is it applies a force to anything it hits, if it is something that can be moved around. So that's how we're going to apply some force to our cubes and bounce them around. We've got gun end, which we don't actually need for the moment, so I'm just going to comment that out. We then have our first person camera and our next fire, which is going to be used to figure out when we can shoot next. Alright, so the fire rate, weapons range, hit force, and the camera and the next fire. Now, these ones being public means that when you switch back to Unity and we pick on our gun, when it compiles, you will be able to change any of the values for the inspector for those public variables, which allows you to tweak and tune your script as you go. So looking at our code, the gun controller is a mono behavior, which is a type of component, which is all the model for the components within Unity. And the first thing we're going to do in the start method is that we are going to find the parent camera, and we're going to store a reference to that in the FPS camera, and that's so we can use it later on. Then in the update method, which is called, as it says, once every frame, we're going to see if the fire button has been pressed, which Unity maps by default to the left mouse button in our case. And we're going to see if the current time is greater than next fire. And if it is, that means we can shoot. And if it's not, then we won't be able to shoot. So the next fire by default will be initialized to 0. So the first time we press it will be 0 will be less than time.time. Time.time is the number of seconds as a fractional value since the game has started, which is useful for all sorts of things. So the very first thing we're going to do, so if we've pressed the fire button and time.time is greater than the next fire value, we're going to set the next fire value to the current time and add the fire rate. So that's that value at the top there, which means we won't be able to this condition here will not work or not fire until, in this case, 0.25 seconds have passed. All right, so we set up next fire. Now this bit here is where we start to do our raycast. So the very first thing we're going to do is figure out where to shoot the ray from. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take the camera, which is the camera that's for our first person shooter. And we're going to do viewport to world point, which is just a function that moves, translates where the camera is looking to the world, or rather a point in the viewport to a point in the world. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that that point is 0.5, 0.5, and 000. So if we look at the screen in Unity, just press escape. This top left corner here is 0. This corner over here is 1, and this corner over here is 1,1. So that's so basically the screen is in a range from 0 to 1 and 0 to 1, which means that 0.5 and 0.5 in the viewport is right in the center of the viewport. All right. So what that script is doing is it's taking the center of the screen in the X and the Y and right at where the camera is 0, and it's taking that point and turning that into a point in the world space. So figuring out where in the world that point really is, and it's returning that as a vector. So pretty much looking at the center point of where the screen that the camera is looking through, setting that to ray origin. We then create a raycast hit structure, which holds information about anything that got hit by the ray when we shoot it out. And then this checker here basically casts the actual ray. So it returns a boolean, a true or false if we've hit something. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass a ray from the ray origin, so that point that we calculated. It's going to cast it out in a direction, in this case the FPS camera's transformation, in other words where the camera is pointing, the forward vector out of that. And we're going to, if we hit anything, we're going to put that data into the raycast hit structure called hit, and we're going to put the weapons range, which is the distance that we want the ray to fire for, which in our case is currently set to 50. So pretty much we're going to project, if we go back to this diagram here, we're going to project a ray, an invisible ray, from where the camera is, the center point of the camera, looking through where the camera is viewing through the center of the camera's view of the world, all the way through out 50 units, and we're going to see if we hit anything along the way. All right. So the raycast will hit anything that has a collider on it, which our if we look at our targets, we see they've got a box collider, and as well as the fact that they are a rigid body. So the box collider basically is a little box, invisible box surrounding the cube, which we can figure out if we hit it or not, or rather the ray can figure out if it hit it or not. Alright, so if this returns true, it means we hit something. And what we're going to do is we're going to say if the thing we hit, if it has a rigid body, is not equal to null, in other words, it has a rigid body, then we're going to take that rigid body and we're going to add some force to it. And we're going to use the hit normal multiplied by the hit force. Okay, so the hit force is how hard we want to hit it, the amount of force we're going to apply, which is defaults to 100. And the hit normal, in this case it's the minus hit normal. If we go back here, they've got a pretty diagram for that. I'll show a diagram showing there. Yeah. So pretty much when we apply some force to the thing we've hit, we actually want to apply the force in a particular direction, so that we kind of throw it away from where we've hit it. And if we've glanced it on the surface of the cube, we want to fling it in a particular direction. So if this is the green line that is the raycast, where we hit it, Unity will calculate a hit normal, which is basically a perpendicular line to the point of where we hit it. So that can tell us what spot we've hit it. So what we're going to do is we're going to push the cube in the direction of that normal multiplied by the force. All right. As I say, it's all in that article, so you can have a detailed read of that and get a lot more detail of what's going on inside there. So if we go back to Unity now that we have all that set up, if we press play, we should now be able to walk up to one of our cubes. Oh, maybe I can shoot this cube at a distance. Can I see it? There we are. And if I aim at it and hit it, we can see, you can barely see that it moved. Let's find a cube that we can actually see. Try this one. We shoot it. There we are. We can see we pushed it over slightly. And eventually we pushed it off. Now that's sitting on the ground, we can shoot it again. But it's quite unimpressive. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our gun, and on the force we're going to bump that up to 5 times as much, so 500. Alright. So we're going to shoot things now. Alright, that's a bit more impressive. So we can bounce it around now. And it bounces off the wall. We should be able to go and find that one over there and shoot it off the top, hopefully. And that one as well. There it goes. Boing. I shoot it on the corner and spin it. Let's get a better angle of that one. So you can see, because we calculated the hit, if I shoot it on this side it bounces, versus if I shoot it on this side it'll bounce the other way. So the classic tin can in your first person shooter. Okay. So let's look at what all this other code is doing. So if we jump back to the code, we're going to steal some more of this code here. So what we're going to steal is these 3 lines. We're also going to turn that on. Going back to the code, in the start we're going to grab those 2, put them into there, and then we're going to uncomment that bit, this bit, that bit. We're not going to uncomment this bit here. So in that article they have a description of how you can have the box be a shootable box, they call it, which assigns it a bit of health and then basically allows you to damage it until you can destroy it. So if you want to make cubes targets that you can blow up and destroy, have a look at the article and you can follow along there. And then the last thing we're going to do is add that one over there, and if we go back to the code we've got to copy one last little bit, which is this. Alright, so what is all this stuff doing? Okay, so the wait for seconds is a special type of yield instruction that is used with what Unity calls coroutines. I won't get into that too much, but pretty much we're going to use that as a timer to control something, and that's something we're going to control is how long our laser line is on the screen. So what we're going to do in with Unity is we're going to use a line renderer, which is basically a component that draws a line on the screen, and every time we shoot we're going to draw a laser line from the gun barrel out to the target, and it's going to be visible on the screen for 0.07 seconds, which is going there. We've also got a gun audio, so we're going to use a sound when we shoot the gun. All right. So that's what those 3 things are there for. So in our startup routine, we're going to find the line renderer component that's attached to the gun, or to the object that this script is attached to. We're also going to find the audio component, and we already find the camera. Now the other things that we've uncommented in the update method is pretty much when we shoot we're going to start a coroutine, and we're going to call the shot effect method, which is this method that we wrote down at the bottom there. And coroutines are pretty much a mechanism in Unity that allows other things to happen on it's not quite a thread, but like a thread, it runs in the background. And what that means is you can do things that either take time to process, and you can run them in a coroutine so that they don't run inside your update method. And the reason you want to do that is your update method is called every frame, and so if you're doing things like waiting or going into a loop that's doing lots of processing and you do it in your update method, it will slow down your game because this needs to finish quite quickly, because it's called every time a single frame of your screen is updated, and normally you wanted to keep that at least 60 frames per second. So what this start coroutine does is it allows you to call a method or a function that can run separately from the update method. In our case, the shot effect method is going to play the gun noise. It's going to draw or turn on the laser line. It's then going to yield that shot duration, and you'll see that this method looks a little weird in that it's got a yield statement and it returns an I enumerator. So for a function to be used as in coroutine or as a coroutine, it needs to return an I enumerator, and also somewhere in the code it can return a yield method, which is the thing that will either take time, so this might be in a loop and you could be returning yield multiple times, or in this case we're going to return that special wait for seconds object. So it basically return that object, and once that time has passed, the coroutine will carry on executing at this point. So we're going to play the sound, we're going to turn on the line, we're going to wait for 0.07 seconds, and then we're going to turn off the line, and that's all going to be triggered by calling that over there. Now the line itself, line renderer basically is drawn with from 2 points. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the first point, 0. Actually, a line renderer can have multiple points, but in our case, by default, it has 2 points, and we're going to keep it with 2 points. We're going to set the position, the first point, to be the gun end position. And the gun end position is a transform, and we'll set that up later. But basically, we're going to use an empty game object to indicate where the end of the gun is. So we're going to do that. So it's going to set that to the start of the line. It's then going to set the other end of the line to the point of whatever it was that we hit. So it will mark a line on there, and then everything's going to happen as before. Now, if the raycast didn't hit anything, then what we're going to do is we're going to set the position or the end point of the line to be where the ray started, and then we're going to draw that invisible line looking out from the camera a distance of weapon range. So basically 50 units out, and we're just going to calculate a point. That's what this does. It's basically calculating a point 50 units. Weapon range is set to 50. 50 units in a straight line in the direction that the camera is pointing. So in the direction that the camera is pointing from where the camera currently is in a straight line out 50 units. Awesome. Cool. So if we jump back to Unity here, we'll see that once it finishes compiling, it's going to add another option here called a gun end. So if we go to our gun barrel, I'm going to press the hover over there and press F key, so we zoom in. We want to shoot our line from the end of the gun barrel. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on there, we're going to say create an empty. Alright, and it's attached there, and we're going to call it gun end, and currently it's sitting in the center of the gun barrel, so we're just going to drag that out to somewhere over there. Cool. And then if we go back to the gun, we can then take the gun end and drag that into there. Alright. Now the other thing that script required was a component for the line renderer itself, and it also required the audio. Remember how in the script it looks up the line renderer and the audio source. So if we go back to here, we can go add component, we can do search for line renderer, and we can also add a component called audio source. Okay, so for the audio source, we're just going to click on the little pick icon. We don't have a lot of demo sounds that are suitable, but I think we can probably do the landing sound as a suitable audio sound for when we shoot. And the other thing we want to do is play on wake. We want to turn that off so it doesn't shoot when the game starts up. Alright, For the line render itself, what we need to do is, if we look under materials, we need to give it a material, and what we can do is we can create ourselves a new material. So if we go down to the assets area at the top here, we can right click, go create material, and we're going to call it laser. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're just going to set that to a nice kind of green like that. And you can fiddle with a bunch of options, but I think that green laser there will do for us. Cool. And if we then go back to our gun, we can now take our laser material and drop it onto there. And then the last thing we need to do is set under the parameters how wide the line is. So at the moment, if we run the script, hopefully everything's all wide up. We're now shooting out a line. But it looks kind of strange because it's really wide. It's more like a giant blade flying out of our gun barrel. So what we can do is under the line render, under the parameters, we can set the start and end widths, and I'm going to set it to 0.1 and 0.1, which more or less matches the width of our gun barrel when we first created that. So now we get more like a laser line. Whee! And wow, clearly I don't play enough first-person shoot'ems because my aim is atrocious. All right. So that is about it. We just remove file, save our scene, and save our project. And yeah, that's how you create the beginnings of a first-person shooter in Unity. If you found this tutorial useful, please like it and share it with anyone you think might find it useful. Thanks for watching.